Good morning. The U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation will come to order. This morning, I'm pleased to welcome the Amtrak National Transportation Safety Board nominees and their families. Amtrak is an essential transportation provider for communities across the nation. From the Northeast Corridor to the Pacific Northwest, Amtrak connects both rural and urban communities in an environmentally friendly way. But the pandemic took a toll on Amtrak, with ridership down 97% due to COVID-19, and thankfully ridership has significantly improved from the recovery, and company is projected to be back at pre-pandemic ridership levels next year. I especially want to thank Amtrak for working with me to fully restore the Amtrak Cascade service in my state of Washington and Oregon earlier this year. As ridership nears full recovery, Amtrak can focus its attention on expanding service and improving consumer experience. The bipartisan infrastructure law provided a historic $666 billion investment in rail, which will be used to purchase new passenger rail cars for Amtrak Cascades and provide more opportunities for states to expand. Ensuring these funds benefit the entire nation is important to us, and I'm pretty sure we'll hear about transportation across our northern tier states and wanting to make sure that service there is fully operational. Very important aspect, I know, to Senator Tester, to myself, and to many others who want access to our national parks. So while we're moving forward this hearing on nominees, I encourage both the White House and Minority Leader McConnell to work together to ensure that these nominees put forward to the Senate meet the requirements of the law and the country. These nominees are no stranger to the committee. This is the third time the nominees have been before Congress, so hopefully we can get you over the goal line. The Amtrak nominees before us today, Mr. Anthony Kosha, who served as the Amtrak board on the board and as current chair since 2010. Mayor Coos, who I hear about all the time from Senator Durbin, currently serves as the mayor of Normal, Indiana, which is served by the Amtrak route, and Mr. Shabazz, who recently retired from a long career in the federal service, including Undersecretary for Policy at the Department of Transportation under then Secretary Elaine Chao. We are also going to hear this morning from Mr. Alvin Brown, who is nominated by the President as a member of the National Transportation Safety Board and is the nation's safety watchdog, ensuring that both the transportation industry and the Department of Transportation are putting safety first, investigating civil transportation accidents, and providing recommendations that Congress can act on to improve safety. Mr. Brown has a long career in public policy, starting when he worked for then Senator Nelson. I actually didn't see that in your bio, so okay, I saw all the other things. But as former mayor of Jacksonville, which is where I'm very familiar with your record, provides a unique perspective on transportation safety issues that the city had to deal with, and I think that will be beneficial as we require the NTSB to play a larger role in communicating the important safety needs of our nation. Additionally, as the mayor of the nation's 11th largest city, he managed thousands of employees in a budget of nearly $2 billion, so his unique experience will come helpful at NTSB at retaining a workforce that needs to have the technical expertise that is important in a rapidly changing technological sector like transportation is today. So I know we're expecting the ranking member to join us. We asked him, he suggested that we go ahead, but we are joined by our colleague and former member of this committee, Senator Rick Scott, to give an opening statement on behalf of Mr. Brown. And at this time, welcome back to the committee. We miss having you here. So please give an opening statement in support of Mr. Brown.
Well, first, Chair Cantwell, thank you for your hard work, and it's wonderful to be here. We recognize Ranking Member Cruz and members of the committee. It's my great pleasure to introduce an outstanding Florida nominee to you today, former Mayor of Jacksonville, Alvin Brown. Mayor Brown was born in South Carolina. After moving to Florida, he attended Edward Waters College and Jacksonville University. He was elected to lead the city of Jacksonville in 2011. Great time to jump into public service because we got elected basically about the same time. I started in January and you started, I think, in May or June. I got to know Mayor Brown well during my time as governor of Florida. We had a great working relationship. Mayor Brown made infrastructure and transportation safety a priority of his team, and it was a big issue in Jacksonville. As governor of Florida, my team and I worked closely with Mayor Brown to deliver for Jacksonville residents and the millions of visitors that come to and travel through Jacksonville each and every year. Mayor Brown and the Florida Department of Transportation oversaw the I-95 Overland Bridge Replacement Project, a $196 million project considered the largest and most successful highway construction effort in the state's history. We also worked closely with Mayor Brown when he launched a campaign to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety in Jacksonville. The coalition for the initiative included the City Council, Jacksonville Transportation Authority, Duval County Public Schools, the Florida Department of Transportation, and the Florida Highway Patrol. We had the opportunity to work together to obtain federal funding for deepening the St. Johns River to increase the safety and productivity of Jacksonville's port and provide further economic opportunities for the city. And if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have seen the success of Jackson Port today. In addition, Mayor Brown successfully obtained a $10 million Tiger grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to improve the efficiency of Jacksonville's port and increase access to rail and sea transportation. Additionally, Mayor Brown was responsible for the appointment of multiple board members to the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, Jacksonville Port Authority, and Jacksonville Transportation Authority. Chairwoman Mayor Brown has an excellent record of service to the citizens of the great state of Florida and our nation. The NTSB board needs hardworking and dedicated individuals who put safety as their top priority, and I believe that Mayor Brown will do excellent work on behalf of the American people in this row. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here, and I can't say anything but wonderful things about my good friend, Mayor Alvin Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Scott. Thank you for being here, and we'll make sure our committee colleagues know of your support for him, and I'm sure Mr. Brown is very appreciative. So we will now go down the list. First, we will hear from Mayor Brown and his testimony, and I just want to suggest that you can, anybody who wants to introduce any of their family members who are here or joining us virtually can do so. Next, we will hear from Mr. Tony Kocha, the current chair of Amtrak, who's been nominated to serve on the Amtrak board, then from Mr. Coos, and also, finally, Mr. Shabbat. So we'll start with you, Mr. Brown.
Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, members of the committee, I am honored to appear before you today as the nominee to become a member of the National Transportation Safety Board. I am grateful to President Biden for selecting me to serve in this important role. I want to begin by thanking my wonderful wife of 30 years, Cynthia, and my two sons, Joshua and Jordan, for their love and support. My wife, Cynthia, is here with me today, and my sons are watching today's hearing from home. My passion for public service is inspired by my early life experience. My wonderful mother raised 5 children by herself. I had a loving grandmother who instilled values of community service, faith, and hard work. I worked full-time at Winn-Dixie, initially as part of a stock crew, and eventually became a meat cutter to pay my way through school and became the first in my family to graduate from college. Early in my career, a great deal of trust and experience and responsibility was placed on me as a senior member of the White House leadership team under President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore. As Al Gore's Vice President as Senior Advisor for Urban Policy and Vice Chair of the White House Community Empowerment Board, I advised the President and the Vice President on a wide range of domestic issues, including community revitalization, job creation, new business development, and affordable housing. As an executive director of the White House Community Empowerment Board, I led the administration's $4 billion Community Empowerment Initiative. The highly successful programs revitalized impoverished urban and rural communities and generated an unprecedented level of private-public partnership, resulting in over $10 billion in private investments. I also served as a senior advisor to the late Commerce Secretary Ron Brown, focusing on base redevelopment, and I served as senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Housing Development, HUD. At HUD, I oversaw the department's $100 million disaster relief initiative and led the overhaul of the department's disaster response efforts. In 2011, I made history as the first Black elected mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, which is the 12th largest city in the United States, comprised of 840 square miles with urban and rural communities. I was responsible for over 7,500 city employees and managed an annual budget of over $1.6 billion. Jacksonville has one of the largest ports in the United States. As mayor, I led successful partnership efforts to modernize and improve safety at Jacksport, including Harbor Deepening Project, the Mile Point Navigation Fix, and the construction of the state-of-the-art intermodal container transfer facility. As mayor, I've launched a 6-month campaign to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety in Jacksonville. The coalition for this initiative includes the City Council, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, Jacksonville Transportation Authority, Duval County Public Schools, Florida Department of Transportation, and Florida Highway Patrol. The Federal Highway Administration had selected Jacksonville as a pedestrian-focused city, and the initiative sought to improve Jacksonville's then current status as one of the most dangerous cities in the United States for pedestrians and bicyclists. Additionally, during my term as mayor, I was responsible for the appointment of multiple board members to the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, Jacksonville Port Authority, and Jacksonville Transportation Authority. If confirmed by the Senate, become a member of the National Transport Safety Board, I would look forward to working with the board's mission, making transportation safe by conducting investigations and advocating for safety improvements. The NTSB mission is a deeply personal one for me. On October the 26th, 1995, my grandparents, Tillman and Elizabeth Brown, were involved in a crash. While riding in a van along Interstate Highway I-95, south near Manning, South Carolina, the van hit something in the middle of the road and hydroplaned. Due to a major defect in the van's design, the doors opened during the crash and the occupants were thrown out of the vehicle. Both of my grandparents and uncle were killed as a result. This loss, I feel deeply to this day. I would like to thank the committee for considering my nomination this morning, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and very sorry to hear of your personal loss. And I do think it helps inform people about the importance of safety, the importance that the NTSB can play, particularly in a time of change and a change in manufacturing. So look forward to asking you some follow-up questions on that. But thank you for your willingness to serve. Thank you for your leadership in Jacksonville. Mr. Kosha, welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the committee. I'm Tony Kosha, the chairman of Amtrak's Board of Directors. I'm honored to serve on Amtrak's board and to have the opportunity to work with our dedicated Amtrak employees and stakeholders. I'm also grateful for the extraordinary level of support for passenger rail and Amtrak that this committee and Congress have demonstrated. When I joined Amtrak's board in 2010, the company was still recovering from the near bankruptcy in the 2000s that had eroded confidence in management and mission. There was no clear pathway for Amtrak's future, and some questioned whether Amtrak and the national network should continue to exist. I'm proud to say that since then, Amtrak, working with our partners, has made significant progress. We grew ridership nationwide, attracted millions of new customers, while significantly improving financial performance. By the end of fiscal year 2019, Amtrak eliminated over $300 million in annual operating losses, enabling us to increase spending on long overdue capital projects. We completed the nationwide installation of positive train control, and we were the first US-based railroad to implement a comprehensive safety management system. We launched more than a $10 billion program to refleet Amtrak with new energy-efficient US-made trains. We improved customer satisfaction, despite the challenges of operating over aged infrastructure on host railroads that often fail to give Amtrak its vital statutory preference over freight trains. We safely maintained operations during the difficulties of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've restored pre-pandemic service levels on nearly all of our routes. And we hired over 3,700 new employees in fiscal year 2022, and an additional 2,700 during the first 7 months of fiscal year 2023. These new hires, our workforce of the future, have allowed us to restore our operations. Amtrak investments are creating a pathway for strong job opportunities, particularly in segments of the economy that in the past have not benefited from capital expansion. A career at Amtrak and passenger rail represents an opportunity to develop skills that form a long-term career. Amtrak and its state partners were ready when Congress enacted the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which provides significant multi-year capital funding for intercity passenger rail. We've sought for decades. Using that funding, we finally were able to make vital investments in infrastructure and equipment and pursue the improvement and expansion of Amtrak service that the IIJA contemplates. On the Northeast Corridor, we've commenced early construction activities to replace the 150-year-old B&P tunnel in Baltimore and worked on Connecticut bridges and Maryland bridges, as well as construction of the Hudson River Tunnel that's expected to start next year. On our national network, we're working with our partners to improve and expand service, including in states such as Ohio, West Virginia, Tennessee, Minnesota, Idaho, Kansas, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Colorado, and Arizona, all places that today have very little Amtrak service, and this gives us the opportunity to extend that service. We also intend to spend $1.3 billion in IIJA funding to complete the task of bringing all of our stations on our network, for which Amtrak is responsible, into full compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We've made tremendous progress on this level. This funding will allow us to bring this to its full completion. And last December, Amtrak initiated the procurement of new passenger rail cars for our 14 overnight long-distance routes. The new cars will replace our existing fleet with modern equipment that will improve safety, reliability, accessibility, and financial performance. This procurement, the largest U.S. order for long-distance passenger cars since the 1940s, reflects Amtrak's commitment to our long-distance network and our recognition of how important our network is to the communities it serves. The long-distance system is the connective tissue of our national network, and it provides the anchor to expand ridership. Overcoming decades of underinvestment in passenger rail will not be accomplished overnight. Like every other transportation mode, passenger rail will require continued and sustained investment beyond the 5-year horizon of the IIJA. If I am confirmed, I can assure you that Amtrak will be a good steward of the funding you've provided, and that we will accomplish with this funding a case for continued investment. There's never been a more exciting time to be involved with Amtrak. Our nation needs improved and expanded intercity passenger rail service to alleviate congestion, reduce emissions, and provide mobility to our citizens. I'm proud of what we've accomplished at Amtrak since I joined the Amtrak board, and I welcome the opportunity to continue my service. Thank you for your support thus far, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kosha. I want to ask Senator Cruz if you'd like to defer or give an opening statement. And
I'll defer till each of the opening statements.
great. Mr. Cruz, your batter up here.
Thank you, Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm Chris Coos, the mayor of Normal, Illinois, and I'm deeply honored to be nominated to serve on Amtrak's board of directors. I would bring to the board my experience as a mayor, a small business owner, vice chair for passenger rail of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and a frequent Amtrak customer. Perhaps most importantly, I would like to bring my firsthand knowledge of how improved Amtrak service can enhance mobility and economic development. I've been Normal's mayor for 20 years. Normal's, whose population is around 53,000 people, is the home of Illinois State University. It is adjacent to the city of Bloomington and about halfway between Chicago and St. Louis. 2 Amtrak routes serve the multimodal Bloomington Normal station known as Uptown Station, and located in downtown Normal. That is the Texas Eagle, a long-distance route from Chicago to St. Louis and San Antonio, and the Lincoln Service, a state-supported route between Chicago and St. Louis. When I became mayor, less than 75,000 passengers a year used Amtrak's small Bloomington Normal station. In 2010, Normal was awarded one of the first Tiger, now called RAISE grants, to build Uptown Station. Its construction, which created hundreds of good-paying jobs, was completed just 2 years later, on time and within budget, thanks to a successful partnership among all levels of government, local contractors, and unions. Uptown Station received a LEED Silver certification for its environmentally responsible construction and design. In addition to Amtrak, it is served by public transit and regional buses and contains town offices. Uptown Station is adjacent to the Constitution Trail, a bike and pedestrian trail that traverses Normal and Bloomington. Uptown Station is an incredible success in every respect, now the second busiest Amtrak station in Illinois, behind only Chicago Union Station. Ridership more than tripled since I became mayor to nearly 230,000 passengers a year in pre-pandemic 2019. Private spin-off development spurred by Uptown Station included new housing, totaled $175 million. Today, Uptown Station is the anchor of a vibrant mixed-use downtown that includes a children's discovery museum, 2 hotels, a conference center, and attractive public places. Uptown Station's success is attributable to partnership and engagement among all levels of government, the private sector, and the community, all of whom recognize the benefit that supporting and investing in passenger rail could provide. When faster schedules are implemented on the Chicago to St. Louis route later this month as a result of the long-planned increase in maximum speeds to 110 miles per hour, travel time from Bloomington Normal's Uptown Station to Chicago will be reduced to approximately 2 hours, and St. Louis will be less than 3 hours away. As a member of Amtrak's board, I will work to develop collaborative relationships among all intercity passenger rail stakeholders, like those that led to Uptown Station's success. I hope to see other cities and towns throughout the United States, including places not served by Amtrak today, replicate what Normal has done and enjoy the benefits it has realized. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act provided for the first time multi-year federal funding that should attract state, local, and private investments. I hope it will be followed by a sustainable, long-term funding source for intercity passenger rail, like those provided for other forms of passenger transportation. I admire what Amtrak has accomplished, but I also recognize its needs to improve. There are several areas I intend to focus on if confirmed to serve on Amtrak's board. One is improving long-distance service. Long-distance trains are even more important to travelers from rural communities, such as on the Texas Eagle, many who use the train because no other public transportation option is available. And they provide a significant portion of Amtrak's service on many short-distance corridors, including the Chicago-St. Louis corridor on which Normal is located. Amtrak also played a major role in the mobility and independence of the disability community. Providing its members with access and reliable services should be one of Amtrak's top priorities. Amtrak needs to go above and beyond the bare minimum for passengers with disabilities by acquiring new equipment that better suits their needs and upgrading station infrastructure. Enhancing safety is paramount. After years of effort, Normal secured federal and state grants. It is matching that will fund a much-needed underpass in Uptown Station that will provide a safer crossing of the tracks for Amtrak passengers, pedestrians, and trail users. I hope to encourage similar projects in other Amtrak-served communities. Finally, as the long-time owner of 2 small retail businesses, I recognize how important it is to improve Amtrak's customer experience. Another priority is improving Amtrak's on-time performance. The freight railroads over which Amtrak operates must be held accountable for meeting agreed-upon timetables. I look forward to the opportunity to work closely with the members and staff of this committee and all Amtrak stakeholders to create a larger, more effective, and even safer passenger rail system. And I'd be happy to answer whatever questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. Mr. Sabatz, welcome to the committee. Look forward to your testimony.
Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, distinguished senators, thank you for considering my nomination to the Board of Directors of the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. This committee has vetted me twice before. You generously forwarded my nomination to the floor without dissent as Assistant Secretary for Aviation International Affairs and then as Undersecretary of Transportation for Policy. I now count 38 years of military, U.S. Department of Transportation, and other public service. I hope my performance as Assistant Secretary, my experience as Acting Undersecretary representing Secretary Elaine L. Chow on the Amtrak Board from June of 2019 through January of 2021, and my overall background in transportation, particularly rail transportation, will earn your approval again. I have extensive experience overseeing rail capital projects. Starting in 2009, I was the designated federal official responsible for implementing the first three years of the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. We eventually built over 15,000 transportation projects, including signature rail projects such as Moynihan Station and the Uptown Station in Normal, Illinois, that Mayor Coos mentioned in his statement. Prior to that, I served in 2005 as the Transportation Counselor in the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, responsible for directing U.S. government efforts to rebuild the Iraq Republic Railroad. Before joining the U.S. Department of Transportation, I saw passenger rail from the state government perspective. From 1994 to 2001, I was a principal transportation consultant in the California State Legislature and reviewed all proposed legislation affecting passenger rail and the state's cooperation with Amtrak. I have also had private sector experience with freight railroads. I interned in the strategic planning office of one Class I railroad while in business school and consulted for another following graduation. Many of my other transportation roles have involved extensive cooperation with freight railroads. This committee knows my familiarity with the transportation needs of rural America. At DOT, I manage the Essential Air Service program, supporting over 170 small rural communities, many of which are also served by Amtrak long-distance routes. I appreciate how vital inner-city public transportation is to the mobility of these communities and their economic development. If confirmed, I am committed to maintain and enhance Amtrak as a nationwide rail passenger corporation. If confirmed to the Amtrak Board, my first priority would be the safety and security of the public and of the passengers and crew. This is second nature to me. I spent nearly 20 years in a variety of roles at the U.S. Department of Transportation, which is primarily a safety regulatory agency. Safety infused everything we did. For example, many of the projects that we selected for the ARA funding included elimination of at-grade rail crossings or safety improvements on rail lines and bridges. My second priority would be to continue to improve passenger service. To do so, strong relationships with the private railroads that host Amtrak services and with Amtrak's state and local partners are essential. If confirmed, I would leverage my past experience to push for Amtrak to expand the services it provides in partnership with these stakeholders. A third priority is rigorous financial stewardship, making the best use of taxpayers' dollars Amtrak receives. Amtrak's board should ensure that the greatly increased funding Congress has provided in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is spent in a cost-efficient manner that maximizes public benefits and minimizes the impact on the taxpayer. I have had several significant relevant past experiences managing sudden influx of federal funds, including the Recovery Act, in Iraq, at the Small Business Administration after Hurricane Katrina, and with Amtrak during the pandemic. I am joined today by my better half, the accomplished and wonderful Chiling Tong, who is also the president of the National Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, or National ACE. For the last 23 years, our passion project has been the foundation we established to promote civic awareness, involvement, and effectiveness among Asian Pacific American college students. This summer, the International Leadership Foundation has brought 34 fellows to Washington, D.C. to intern in federal government offices, including the White House and with the Senate Majority Leader. Several of our fellows are here today to witness today's confirmation hearing. I thank you again for your consideration. I am grateful to Senator McConnell for recommending me to the President and to President Biden for nominating me. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Savant. Thank you for being here and for that statement today. I'll now turn to the ranking member, Senator Cruz, for his statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to all the nominees for being here today. First, we're here to consider Alvin Brown to be a member of the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB. The NTSB serves the important function of thoroughly investigating transportation incidents to identify their causes, and to make recommendations to prevent similar incidents. Both private sector and public sector transportation operators learn from the NTSB investigations and often voluntarily implement its recommendations. The NTSB also provides valuable information for Congress and for federal agencies to consider when developing transportation policy. I believe that Mr. Brown can help the NTSB fulfill its mission. As the mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, he oversaw 7,000 employees and implemented the city's transportation policy. During his tenure, he successfully built a coalition and led a campaign to address transportation safety. He also served as vice chairman of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Transportation Committee, which examined best practices for safety improvements across different transportation modes. On top of that, Mr. Brown has significant experience leading large, complex projects, like the multi-million-dollar project to deepen the Port of Jacksonville. And since last year, he has been serving at the U.S. Department of Transportation. I look forward to hearing from Mr. Brown today, and I would note also that he has earned the respect of Senator Rick Scott, who is a good friend of mine and whose judgment I trust. And Senator Scott has personally commended to me just how capable he believes you are and what an excellent job you will do. And that carries great weight with me. Second, we're here to consider some of the President's nominees to serve as members of Amtrak's Board of Directors. The three nominees here are all experienced public servants. I want to thank Mr. Kosha, Mayor Coos, and Mr. Sabat for their willingness to oversee our national intercity passenger railroad that American taxpayers subsidize every year with billions of dollars. However, I do have an obligation to raise a concern with the legality of the entire slate of nominees that President Biden has placed before this committee. A bipartisan group of Commerce Committee members has already raised this issue in multiple letters to the President. Unfortunately, he has yet to fix the problem. The Amtrak Board is comprised of 8 Senate-confirmed members in addition to its CEO and the Secretary of Transportation. In 2021, Congress passed bipartisan legislation to ensure that Amtrak's board is geographically diverse and not dominated by board members from the Northeast Corridor. As a result, federal law now explicitly prohibits more than 4 of the 8 Senate-confirmed board members from being from the Northeast Corridor. That means that a maximum of 4 Amtrak board members can be from the 8 states plus the District of Columbia that make up the Northeast Corridor. This limitation is important because Amtrak operates in 37 other states, including Texas, through its national network of long-distance and state-supported routes. The Americans who reside outside of the Northeast Corridor and whose taxes generously support Amtrak's operations must have their interests fairly represented on Amtrak's board. Unfortunately, even with the 2 nominees yet to be submitted, 5 of the President's current slate of 6 nominees for the Amtrak board reside in the Northeast Corridor. That is clearly in conflict with federal law. The President needs to fix this legal defect by withdrawing one of the Democratic nominees from the Northeast Corridor. It's the President's decision which nominee to withdraw, but this slate needs to comply with the statute. Having said that, I'm still eager to hear about the vision that each of the 3 nominees here has for Amtrak for responsibly managing our country's national passenger railroad. In recent memory, Amtrak has had challenges. Amtrak has at times failed to operate responsibly, and it's struggled to build partnerships with states that subsidize certain Amtrak services. And during the pandemic, Amtrak awarded large bonuses to executives even while service suffered from the effects of reduced employee numbers, which is unseemly for an entity dependent on taxpayer money. The railroad can and must do better. Amtrak received $22 billion in the 2021 infrastructure law and will likely receive billions more in discretionary federal funding. including for the spectacularly expensive Gateway program between New Jersey and New York City. Having an Amtrak Board of Directors that provides effective management consistent with congressional direction is more important now than ever. I look forward to hearing from each of these nominees what you would do to ensure such management. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. And now we'll go to questions for the nominees. I'll jump in right here with the Pacific Northwest Corridor that had service reestablished and to the pre-pandemic levels, but staffing was a major issue. And so I really want to know from each of the nominees what you are doing, what you think we need to do to make sure that we are upgrading staffing. I want to understand, too, what we are doing to add more capacity to those Pacific Northwest routes between Seattle and Portland by the fall of this year. And on safety, want to understand, we basically, after the DuPont accident in Washington that killed 3 people and injured 60, Amtrak instituted a safety management system, very important for improving safety culture. But they were designed to ensure that they addressed the new risks. I'm concerned about an Inspector General report from December that found Amtrak had lax security practices and led to former employees selling keys to sensitive areas on the internet. It is critical that Amtrak ensure the safety is the #1 priority. So if each of you could address those issues to the degree that you are involved or knowledgeable.
Chair Cantwell, I'll begin for obvious reasons that my current tenure at Amtrak gives me, I guess, the ability to respond directly to some of the issues you raised. And frankly, those are all issues that are very important to the board and to me personally, and for which we've spent a considerable amount of time. First, to sort of address your question about workforce, and in particular, having the adequate staffing to create the increased levels of capacity in our Pacific Northwest service. The need to hire qualified people to work at Amtrak and to operate the nation's railroad system has been an absolute priority, and we have committed an enormous amount of effort to recruiting and training and finding people who can make a career, which we believe is a very promising basis for a career as part of the national rail system.
Do you think this is key to getting services expanded or reestablished?
I think it is, but I guess I'm here to report to you what I think is good news in the sense that in the last fiscal year, we were able to hire 3,700 new employees to Amtrak to restore much of what was lost as a result of the pandemic and normal attrition. And in this fiscal year, we've already hired 2,700 additional employees to give us the full complement to restore that service. Specific to the Northwest service, we are very deeply into the specific training program to train people on that territory to be able to put into effect the 2 additional frequencies that we expect to put into effect. And I'm confident and can commit to you today that we will meet the deadline to do that and that we have the adequate resources to do it because of the work we've done in the last 12 months of recruiting and building a workforce.
Safety management systems?
I will tell you that the lessons and the issues surrounding Train 501 are very deeply ingrained in my mind and in my heart. I know that that nominee Brown has a very important task, and safety is our top priority. We have initiated a number of different issues relative to adopting an overall safety management system that, as you know, you're never done with developing a full safety management system. We have affected the training from the most senior executives to the people in the field, all of whom have helped us to create what we believe to be a safety culture where people are not afraid to speak up where there's an issue that they noticed, where the people are not punished for bringing up safety issues that need to be addressed, and we're adapting the use of modern technology to allow us to train people better, the use of simulators, the use of different training protocols, all of which I think have put us in a position of creating a much safer railroad. And the early indications are that our numbers are supporting that, including the very low number of incidents.
Mr. Shabatz, would you make workforce a priority and safety management system culture a priority in reestablishing service?
Senator Cantwell, yes, I would. I think staffing, both quantity and quality of employees, is key and essential to increased service. And I believe that increased service is essential if we want to get Amtrak back to operating in the black. So all those things tie together. On the safety side, if confirmed, I and my colleagues here will be on the board of directors, will not be management. And so there's a distinction there what our roles are for culture, for safety. But I'll echo what Chairman Kosha said about the culture. An appropriate role for the board of directors is to ensure that we have a culture of safety so that the experts that are brought on board in Amtrak feel comfortable moving forward to say, we have these challenges that need to be addressed, and no one is afraid for their career or for their position if they're reporting safety challenges that need to be addressed.
Thank you. I'll either come back to you, Mr. Brown, or in writing, either way, but Senator Cruz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kosha, you've been a staunch advocate of the Gateway program between New Jersey and New York City. The price tag for this program has continually risen, with the current estimate at $37 billion. I remain concerned that this number reflects inflated labor costs at the expense of taxpayers all across the rest of the country. Nevertheless, given that the 2021 infrastructure law has already made tens of billions of dollars available for Gateway and other Northeast Corridor programs, it is important to know that Amtrak can complete major capital projects in a timely and cost-effective manner. Mr. Kosha, what steps has Amtrak taken during your tenure as Amtrak Board Chairman to improve its completion of capital projects in a timely and a cost-effective manner?
Thank you, Ranking Member Cruz, for that question. And in fact, it goes to the very heart of what I know is a very top priority to the entire board. And certainly, in my career, I've had lots of exposures to large projects and have seen the difficulty, frankly, throughout the United States of being able to manage mega projects. You know, the notion of being able to plan smart and then build quickly, the ability to sort of deploy resources in the most efficient way. What I would say to you is that we understand that there are methods that can be used. There are means and methods that can be used to advance mega projects, which historically in government-sponsored projects have not been adequately deployed. Some of that involves the right level of oversight, the right level of planning. I would submit to you that a major reason for cost overruns is the desire to plan very quickly and then try to sort of develop solutions in the field. The reality is that until you have an absolute solid plan that has been vetted and reviewed from an engineering perspective and a planning perspective, where you have a certain amount of predictability about cost inputs, it is a very risky proposition to go out and build. I recognize that the Gateway program will be a very significant challenge for any entity in the United States to build, let alone entities for whom, in some cases, this is a new sort of endeavor for them. But we have to, as a nation, prove our ability to build large-scale projects and to do them on time, on mission, and safely and effectively on budget. And those are all things that we're now building through building the right kind of expertise internally, people who have the kind of project management expertise, much of which comes from the private sector that we've been able to borrow, instances where we can look at other mega projects that have been done in the United States and around the world to find those means and methods that can work. And we are, in fact, deploying those things in, I think, a very effective way. And I'm hopeful that Gateway will actually be a demonstration of our nation's ability to undertake a very large-scale project of this nature where there is an absolute need for it to be built, but do it in a responsible way. And we should agonize over every step of the process and hold people accountable for meeting benchmarks at different intervals to determine that we're keeping it on progress.
$37 billion is a lot of money. Is Gateway going to come in on budget, or are we going to come back and discover that $37 billion has become 40, has become 50, has become $60 billion?
Senator, in my experience, when people use a budget number before they've actually done the work, it's largely because they're trying to create optics around it and not because they necessarily know. The $37 billion number, which you refer to, and I understand how that number and other numbers have been socialized around it, represent the full build-out of the entire Gateway program. I would submit to you respectfully that the full build-out of that program is important, not just for the New York and New Jersey region, but for the Northeast Corridor and for the nation's economy, as are many other projects around the country. But We are building it in phases where each phase that we build has an independent value that is meaningful. The first phase that we're building is the Hudson Tunnel
Let me
project.
try again with my question. Do you believe the total budget will come in under budget?
I believe that the first phase, which is the Hudson Tunnel project, which has been budgeted at $16.5 billion, yes, I do believe that we must come in at that number, correct?
That's helpful. I would encourage all three of you, as you're heading home, to take a look. Next door to the Capitol is the Supreme Court building. It is a beautiful building in Washington, D.C. And if you go look at the history of the construction of the Supreme Court building, Congress appropriated money to build the Supreme Court building. It was constructed, it's a gorgeous building. It actually has 24-karat gold inlaid in the ceilings. And at the end of the construction, they had money left over that they returned to the taxpayers. That was a different era, to be sure, but that is a model to be aspired to. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. As I suggested, Mr. Brown, I have to run out, but I may come back to ask you about the same safety workforce culture needs at NTSB and the president's budget. So how do we have the right staffing given the modernization of technology, and what other larger roles NTSB can be in commenting on both space issues and on the trend report that was part of our safety bill that we passed. But I'm going to turn over the committee to, I see Senator Klobuchar is actually here, but I am turning the hearing over to Senator Tester, who will take it from here. But anyway, Senator Klobuchar.
Mr. Kosha, I'll start with you. One of the things that we did in the bipartisan infrastructure law was to expand and add up to 39 corridor routes to serve some cities that are connected, say, rural areas to urban areas. I've always been, of course, a big fan of the Empire Builder route that goes through the Twin Cities. Could you talk about those two issues? First of all, improving and maintaining passenger rail on routes that connect rural to urban. And then secondly, the Empire Builder, and specifically, which is Chicago, of course, Minnesota, and then on, but we've had issues with it being on-time performance issues. So two somewhat related, but unrelated as well.
Senator, thank you for that question. Yes, I don't have terms to express how strongly I feel about how there are so many places in the United States where we know there is demand for rail service and where that capacity doesn't exist. That is an absolute priority, and the IIJA gives us finally the capital and the facility and the resources to do something about that. We think there are many, many communities that are underserved from a rail standpoint. Some are major metropolitan areas that surprisingly have very little or no rail service from intercity passenger rail. And many, as you suggest, are rural communities where, frankly, unless there is Amtrak service, there are really no other options for them. Aviation is not an option for many of these communities. These are population bases which may not have access to ability to move around in other forms. So we believe that the map for Amtrak needs to be redrawn to reflect what the population of the United States looks like in 2023, and not what it looked like in 1971 when Amtrak inherited assets from defunct railroads. So we think there is an enormous amount of opportunity that's driven by demand. In order to achieve that level of service, we will need a number of things to happen. First and foremost, and I fully expect everyone should hold Amtrak accountable for using the resources that we have, for being intelligent about the decisions we make, for doing our homework and making sure that we are planning these routes in a way that intelligently captures where demand is and what the best service frequencies are. But we're also going to need help from others. Our state partners are going to play a vital role in this. We can't do this without them. It is a partnership, and we have to learn to be good partners, as do they, and we all have to work together, and there are many instances where we've already done that. We also need a lot of cooperation from the host railroads. As you know, once we're off the Northeast Corridor and certain other limited parts of the country, we are tenants on railroads that are owned by the Class I railroads. It is entirely possible to operate an efficient supply chain, freight capacity, and passenger rail at the same time. We can do both of these things.
Thank you.
That's something we have to do.
Is there another point you want to make? Because I wanted to turn to something else.
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, great. I really appreciate it. Mr. Brown, NTSB, thank you. I know that your grandparents were killed in a car accident. I have made distracted driving a major priority of mine in the Senate. I think you know the numbers, which are incredibly scary. Could you talk about the importance of continuing a focus on distracted driving?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for that question. I think one of the things we need to do is just eliminate distracted driving. Part of it is distracted driving is those drivers who aren't paying attention to their tasks. The issue is continue to use cell phones, iPads, and so I think part of it is just eliminating it. Don't use those electronics. If we can get all states to agree to do away with those electronics, I think that would be a big help. The NTSB, as you know, is big on focusing on safety, and I think that's one of the things they talked about in their recommendation.
Okay, one last thing. As you may have heard, we've had a couple of close calls with train derailments in Minnesota. We have had derailments. One was very close by a town and 20 cars down. And I have to say that not only did the rail company get their people there the next morning to clean up, unlike Ohio, the substance was ethanol and it burned off in the fire, as well as didn't get into the ground. But I will say NTSB investigators were some of the first on the scene and did an incredible job. Could you just quickly tell me how Congress can help ensure NTSB is able to more effectively determine the causes of accidents and recommend safety improvements that could prevent such accidents from occurring in the future?
Well, I think the safety management system would be a great way to continue to do that, but also resources. I think one of the things that the board is really focused on is really having a robust 21st century staff that is fully staffed and have the resources so they can compete with the challenging technologies that are out there to continue to help make America safe.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our witnesses, thank you so much for being with us today. Mr. Kosha, I want to come to you and congratulations on your nomination to be the director of the Amtrak Board of Directors. And I want to talk with you a little bit about the supply chain and some of the issues that have come up around the supply chain recently. And of course, we recognize that Tennessee and Memphis in particular is along many of those key routes and those Class 1 railroads all going through Memphis. So what are you doing to balance efforts to expand passenger rail over existing freight lines that are at capacity in our state?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And you raise a very important topic. The only way we could really expand passenger service through most of the country is to develop the right partnership with the host railroads, who have an equally important task of keeping the supply chains open and operating effectively. We believe there's a number of effective ways to manage that. Amtrak trains actually use up very little capacity on those railroads, but the freight railroad trains, as you know, the consus is very long, so therefore there are many sidings where they don't
Right.
fit.
Let me ask you this. Are you involving the freight lines at the front end of this discussion,
Yes.
recognizing that those Amtrak lines may be just sitting there, fallow, unused for the bulk of the time?
Yes, we are, Senator. We are at the very outset of any discussions around increased rail usage on any of the host railroads. They are among the very first conversations that we have. And some of the freight railroads that we work with, we've developed a very good dialogue to be able to work through these issues together and, frankly, look for funding mechanisms to make improvements where necessary to accommodate both of our needs.
Okay, wonderful. I've got another question for you. I had read a New York Post article from October 22 And it referenced that the 10 highest paid Amtrak executives raked in six-figure bonuses in 2021, despite the rail network struggling with low ridership and plummeting revenues. The top earning employees received earned incentive bonuses of more than $200,000 each. The bonuses enraged the Transportation Workers Union that represents more than 1,000 Amtrak employees, which noted in a statement that taxpayers are in part footing the bill for these extravagant bonuses. So what was your role in giving Amtrak execs bonuses of more than $200,000 each? And please provide me a detailed description of this decision-making process.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And I recognize the concerns raised by compensation levels at any entity where the federal government plays a significant role in providing financing and funding to it. And Amtrak certainly is in such a position and should be held accountable for that. I need to add some context, though, to how that result actually occurred, which is that in the 2013 timeframe, as most of us who are currently on the board joined, it was incredibly clear to us that Amtrak suffered from a number of issues that had impeded the first 40 years of its history. Certainly a lack of capitalization was one, but the other was management that was not frankly capable of operating the railroad at the highest level that it possibly could. And to that effect, Amtrak began to recruit very experienced people who were almost without exception coming from the private sector, because people who are going to operate in those positions at Amtrak are either going to come from the Class I railroads
So what
or
you're
airlines.
telling me is you felt justified in giving these top executives bonuses of $200,000 each.
Senator, as part of that restructure of Amtrak, we essentially terminated what was a very expensive benefit program that was not tied to the performance of the company, and in its place, we put in an incentive
But
compensation
ridership
program.
was down, utilization was down, and you still chose to give them bonuses of $200,000.
Senator, the
So
employees
what are you planning to give them bonuses this year? Or what were the bonuses that you let in
Sen-
2022? Will you provide that for me in writing?
I will, Senator, and all of the compensation issues are a matter of record, but I will tell you that the group that was entitled to these incentives is the same group that was able to eliminate over $300 million a year in operating losses, which for the first time in Amtrak's 50-year history, it essentially was broke even. The pandemic created an enormous amount of dislocation to the company.
But sir, if Amtrak was able to sustain themselves, they would not be needing money from the federal government. My time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my turn. I want to thank you guys for being here. I appreciate your willingness to serve the nation, and I appreciate you being able to appear before this committee today. Look, I have made my position on nominees clear as it applies to the Amtrak board. I was one of 10 people, 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, that negotiated the bipartisan infrastructure law. It did not happen by accident. We intentionally put language in that would have the Amtrak board members reflect our nation's geography with specific requirements on how many members could come from Northeast quarter states relative to the other parts of the country. The administration put forward a list of very good nominees, incredibly good nominees, but they did not comply with the geographic requirements. I made my concerns known when some of these folks appeared before committee, some of you guys. The president then renominated the same slate in the new Congress, despite the issues which I believe are serious that I raised. And I am frustrated the administration did not make the adjustments that the law requires, and they could have. As I announced in April, the slate of Amtrak board nominees must comply with the law before I'm going to vote to support any of them. And as I said earlier, that doesn't mean that I think they're unqualified. It means that I think they need, the president needs to follow the law. There's still work to be done to get resolution on this, but I'm confident the administration will do what it needs to do that based on the progress so far. I think this hearing is a good thing to have. And I want to start with you, Chairman Kosha. Good to see you again. It's good to see you in person. In fact, over the Zoom is good, but this is much better.
Agreed.
At the hearing last year, I asked you and some of the other nominees if you had ever been to Montana. You had indicated that you hadn't. In a follow-up conversation, I believe you committed to riding the Empire Builder, which is the long-distance train that goes through our great state. I understand you made that trip recently. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator.
I appreciate you doing that. I think there's no better way to understand a long-distance passenger rail than to ride that train yourself. Now, I understand that you're going to meet a member of my staff in a great little town called Havre, Montana, which is only 50 miles from my farm. But that meeting didn't work out. I am told that was because the train was running 4.5 hours late. Is that correct?
I think it was 2.5 hours late, but nonetheless, it definitely was.
2.5 is better than 4, but it's still unacceptable.
That's correct.
I wished I could say that I was surprised, but the truth is those kind of delays are way too common in long-distance routes. And I will tell you that I want our rail system to work. I want it to be good. I want it to be the best in the world, okay? Never going to happen as long as that's. In fact, I got to thinking what would the passenger ridership be on the Acela from New York to Washington, D.C. if it was 2.5 hours late? There wouldn't be many folks on that. And so the question I have is, what is Amtrak doing to improve performance, to make sure that we have a reliable service table?
Senator, thank you for that question, and I just want to quickly say a couple of things. One is that my trip on the Empire Builder was not only something that was overdue, but the reality is that it is what I and other members of the board should do. I've ridden many of our long-distance trains. It took me too long to ride that particular train for a variety of reasons, but it is clear to me how vital that service is to so many people and so many different levels. What I learned on the trip is sort of an immeasurable, kind of experience that I completely understand why it's so important to so many people, which gets to the point of being able to provide safe, reliable service that people can count on. The reason the train was delayed, and I unfortunately could not meet with your staff members, is that there was actually an accident with a freight train ahead of us. And, because I'm the chairman of Amtrak, I heard from pretty much everyone at the host railroad, frankly, apologizing for the delay. Yeah. And my response to that was, I'm actually not a paying customer. There are paying customers on there. That's who we all should really be apologizing to. And the solution to the issue is, in large part, on creating the right framework where host railroads are, in fact, providing those preference rights. There are things that are going to happen to both Amtrak and the hosts that are beyond our control. Right. In fact, that instance was one of them. But there are many things that we can control, and there are many ways for us to work better together, and we've done this. And with some of the hosts, we've actually made market improvements on it. But to respond to your question, it is both enhancing our own operating performance and enhancing our relationship with the host railroads that I think will bring us more reliable service and more frequencies that will allow people to get more from the railroad usage.
Thank you. I'm out of time, but I just have to ask this one question. Since I got the gavel, I will. Mr. Brown, you're not on the NTSB now currently, are you?
Repeat that question again?
You're not on the NTSB currently?
No, sir.
Okay, so we had a train accident out of Joplin, Montana, coming on 2 years. We still don't have NTSB's report on that. I've just got to tell you, if you confirmed, I hope you crack the whip and get some folks to get a little more timely. This is nothing short of unacceptable, okay? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next up, we've got Senator Moran.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate all of you being here and your willingness to serve in the capacities for which you've been nominated. 2 of the 4 of you, we've had conversations on numerous occasions in this setting and elsewhere. And it would not surprise you that I'm going to ask Mr. Sabat the same thing that I asked the 2 of you and others. I have had a long-time interest in making certain that long-distance Amtrak service is a priority of the board. We've worked to change the legislation that creates the purpose for which Amtrak exists, to make clear or to make clearer the value of long-distance Amtrak service. And without exception, Mr. Sabat, the individuals that I voted for, which has generally been every nominee, has made a commitment to me and to this committee, to Congress, that they will be a supporter of long-distance passenger service. I would be interested in hearing you frame in the words that you use what that means to you.
Senator, first, thank you for the question, and far be it from me to be the first witness before you to break that tradition of committing to.
Well, I always worry they're just saying it because I'm asking it. But to date, it seems to me that the nominees that we've had these conversations with have actually meant it.
Yeah, as do I, and to drive home that point, if I may, Chairman Kosha, in answer to a previous question, referenced back in 2019 when Amtrak was in fact on track for the, pardon the rail pun, was on target to meet its, for the first ever period of time to be, to operate in the black for the year. And then COVID hit and we were unable to do so. That was when I was representing the department on the board of directors. During that same period of time, I think it was around October, the Inspector General issued a report. And the Inspector General's report drove home the importance of the national network, the long-distance trains, and said, in order for Amtrak to be consistently profitable in the future, what was required was more frequent, on-time, a long-distance network. I believed that when the Inspector General's report came out in 2019. I believe that today, and if confirmed to the Board of Directors, that would be one of the torches that I would carry on the board, is for an improved national network in long-distance service.
As I believed your two colleagues previously, I believe you. You and I know each other. I think the last time we may have been together was in Farnborough, dealing with airports and airplanes and aviation and aerospace. And I wish you well. I too share the same problem that Senator Tester outlined in his commentary to you. I would guess that both of us are speaking to the Biden administration, not to you specifically. But the law has been changed in 2021 to ensure that there is a geographically diverse and non-dominated board, a board not dominated by the the Northeast corridor. And at least 4 of the 8 Amtrak board members appointed by the president shall, quote, reside in or near the regions of the United States that are geographically distributed outside the Northeast corridor. Under federal law, the Northeast corridor means Connecticut, Delaware, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. And that's not the case with the administration's nominees. And I use this opportunity to reiterate to the administration a letter that 7 senators, later joined by Senator Tester in his own letter, in our case to the president, outlining the insistence that those provisions be complied with. And so I hope that you will help me get the attention of, I don't know who wants to flip a coin. I'm sorry you come from New Jersey, Mr. Kosha, but we need to figure out how this law can be complied with. And it is important to me that legislation passed on behalf of the American people is complied with by an executive branch. So there's a philosophical issue here, and there's a practical issue here as I try to make certain that the Southwest Chief and the potential Heartland, increasing role of the Heartland Flyer is protected. Mr. Kosha, anything you'd like to add?
Only to say, Senator, that I totally understand and recognize your very appropriate concerns about that issue. Board nominations are, as you know, way above my pay grade, but I will tell you, as a humble resident of the great state of New Jersey, that I completely understand, probably better than most people would, just how important the national system is and what it means to so many people. And I am committed, notwithstanding me, my wife, and my 5 children all being New Jerseyans, but still having that
Well,
same sense.
we can find you a home in Kansas if you're interested in serving on the Amtrak board.
There are days that would actually be very
I
welcome.
understand.
I understand.
And I suppose, based upon Senator Tester's question, I should ask, have you ever ridden the Southwest Chief?
I have.
That was
I
my
have.
expectation.
I have, yes.
And Mr. Kos and Mr. Kosha, you have demonstrated your commitment to to living up to your commitment that you made to me, and I'm grateful for that. And Mr. Savad, I thank you for what you said. This issue became prominent for me when visiting with a previous CEO of Amtrak. The solution to Amtrak's problems on the Southwest Chief was to provide bus service between Kansas and New Mexico, and it occurred to me that there's a philosophy here that is contrary to what I think to replace bus service, to replace train service, to replace passenger service with a bus between destinations along Amtrak is not a satisfactory solution from my perspective, and it's caused me to make certain that we have a different attitude and approach toward those long-distance routes. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Senator Tester, and anybody. We have a lot of room in Nevada. You can come way out west and come there, and I'm sure Montana, you got some room there too. So if you get feeling too crowded in New Jersey, come on out west or the Midwest. But I want to thank you all for being here today for this really important hearing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Northern Nevada today, because Northern Nevada really has some beautifully vibrant rural communities, and they rely on Amtrak's California Zephyr line, which is a long-distance route that travels through Reno, Winnemucca, and on to Elko. And for many hardworking Nevadans, Amtrak passenger rail is the only affordable and accessible means of transportation to get from our rural parts of the state to the Reno-Sparks metro area, which is where many of the Northern Nevada jobs are, where our major hospitals are, where our medical services are located, our veteran services located there. And before the pandemic, an average of 84,000 Nevadans annually rode long-distance passenger rail through the state, like I said, including our veterans in rural areas who have to get to the VA Sierra Nevada healthcare system facilities in Reno. So in June 2020, I sent a letter along with Senators Cortez Masto, Senator Tester, Senator Manchin, that expressed our concerns with Amtrak's proposal at the time to significantly reduce long-distance service because of really this devastating impact it would have on our rural communities, including mine in Nevada. So I'm therefore pleased to see, despite temporary service reductions during the pandemic, the Zephyr now runs again daily and is providing those essential services. So thank you. But Mr. Kosha, Amtrak previously approved expanding service to a new station of the California Zephyr line in West Wendover. It's on the Utah-Nevada border. And I understand the pandemic changed Amtrak's budget priorities, but can you please provide my constituents with an update of any potential plans to add an Amtrak stop in West Wendover, please?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And obviously, I share your view on how important the California Zephyr is to so many communities. And it underscores, frankly, all of our long-distance lines, which are used for so many different purposes, including those who are traveling between two spots and do not have another option. And so therefore, Amtrak provides a very vital service, and we owe it to them for that frequency to be reliable and safe and efficient and affordable. So we completely understand that, and I understand that. West Wendover represents an opportunity, as do a number of different municipalities that are along the long-distance lines. In my opening statement, I mentioned that I view the long-distance service as the connective tissue for Amtrak's national system. It is basically what binds us together and creates all sorts of service opportunities, and this is a perfect example. We are in active discussions with municipal leaders in West Wendover in order to be able to try to come up with a service plan that would work and resources, et cetera, for it. So I'm optimistic that we will find a way to develop a plan that we can jointly pursue in order to provide that level of service to that community. There are many communities, Senator, that would benefit from Amtrak service. We know there's demand out there. We have to find the right way to sort of reach those different communities and provide the resources to do that.
Well, in large states like Senator Tester's and mine, these long distances for these rural communities, it can be life-saving for them to get treatment, particularly when they're going to the hospital. So I'm going to just ask Mr. Coos and Mr. Spat, can I get a commitment from each of you to maintain Amtrak long-distance service if confirmed? And what do you each think about the benefits of adding more lines along the Zephyr? Mr. Coos, we can start with you.
Thank you for that question, and I am very much committed to the long-distance route. We have one that comes through my community. I've ridden it from my community to San Antonio, and was quickly learned how important it was to the smaller communities along that route, not for travel to San Antonio, but for localized travel. And I think a lot of people overlook the fact that those long-distance routes support shorter distance trips to a great extent. So it's very, very important to me, being in the Midwest, that those long-distance systems are vital and grow. I understand some of the challenges that are faced in growing those systems, but look forward to working on that if I'm appointed.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you for the question. As with Mayor Coos, I'm also committed to seeing the growth and development of the long-distance routes, both in Nevada and elsewhere in California. I would look back on my last position within the Department of Transportation, where I oversaw the Essential Air Service Program, 170 rural communities across the country. And the message that you would get from working with the mayors, the leaders of each of them, is the two things that matter the most are reliability and frequency. And so if we're going to have a long-distance network, if we're going to have a national network, then you need to have a network where the routes are, it's not just a once a day or 3 times a week service, but a frequent service. Because with a frequent service and a reliable service, you will build up the customer base that we need in order to make this a service that both works for the community, but is also less of a burden on the taxpayer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Welcome. How many of you have been to Vermont? Well, you've got a prayer. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Well, we're really excited in Vermont about Amtrak and the Ethan Allen route that's made its long-anticipated return through Virgins and Middlebury and Burlington. It's been 70 years since we had that rail service return to Burlington. Last time it was there was 1953. And that route is already overperforming. So folks in Vermont are quite excited about that. And in fact, it's going to exceed expectations by the end of the year. And it's a really big deal. It's bringing about 33,000 people into Vermont, right into the heart of downtown Burlington, our largest city. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Coos, we want to keep that going. But if confirmed, what steps would you take to help support extending and expanding Amtrak services to small and rural states like Vermont?
Let me just reference my time in U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I say there are 2 types of mayors in the United States, and those are mayors that have Amtrak service and want more of it, and those that don't and would like to have it. The demand is huge, and it's going to be an incredible challenge for Amtrak to step up and answer those issues. Fortunately, there's robust funding to address those issues, and I would work on that if appointed to the board as a high priority. I understand how that form of passenger service is vital to smaller communities throughout the United States, and the ability to maintain it and improve it is going to be a high priority for me.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Kosha, I wanted to ask you, we want to extend the rail service to Montreal. It really would be incredibly good for Quebec. It'd be incredibly good for Vermont, and actually points south of Vermont as well. But we need a pre-clearance facility, and it's in the books. I mean, it's been studied, and there's expenses obviously associated with it, but it's a real critical element of making this Ethan Allen train workable and beneficial for Quebec and really all in New England and even down south to New York. So what steps can we take to finally get off the drawing boards on that and have that secure sanitary corridor, I guess is the term, to make this a reality?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. And yes, that is important issue. In fact, we have it on both ends of the country. Chair Cantwell would share the fact that we have similar levels of sort of challenges relative to service between Vancouver and Seattle, and equally,
Right.
the Ethan Allen's ability to get to Montreal and be able to process people from an immigration standpoint correctly is important. As you know, the U.S. government and the Canadian government are in active discussions
Right.
about the development of a facility there. We have been very encouraging, and our sort of effort here has been to frankly push both sides. And we've been very aggressive about, we need to do this and we need to get it done. In the interim, we have already scheduled sessions with CBP to see if there are other methods we can use that don't involve significant construction of new facilities that might provide for an expedited processing. So you should rest assured that we share your view that it is important for us to create that kind of streamlined processing to cross the border. And we are looking at not just capital solutions, but also operating solutions between
Well,
ourselves.
that would be terrific. We'd like to be kept informed about how you're doing on some of these operating practical solutions that can be a method by which we make this happen sooner than we might be able to build a whole facility.
Right. We would be happy to spend time with you and your staff sort of on all the efforts we've been making with the various agencies that have jurisdiction over this to try to come up with a measure.
Well, and also to ask me to be of assistance in any way that I possibly can. This is a very, very important issue for Vermont. Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to yield back to myself. And this is the closing of the hearing. But before we close today's hearing, I have one more question, which we ask of all nominees. If confirmed, will you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee, provide thorough and timely responses to our requests for information as we put together and address important policy issues, and appear before the committee when requested?
Yes.
Yes, Senator.
Yes.
Thank you for that commitment.
Yes, Senator.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Senators will have until the close of business Monday, June 26th, to submit questions for the record to the committee, and witnesses will have until the close of business Monday, July 3rd, to respond to those questions. And I want to thank you on behalf of the entire committee for your appearance today. And that concludes today's hearing.